All right, we are live. This is the Live with Sondra show, and I'm your host, Sondra Shannon, the CEO of Gatemaster Technology, and I'm really excited about today's programming for a number of reasons. And just to keep you in suspense, first, I have to acknowledge I just got back from the IAAPA North American Summit, and boy, did they deliver an amazing one-of-a-kind experiences. The information that we got, like, you're going to be hearing more about this because I met not only some new incredible guests I'd like to have on the show, but also, going to these events always opens my eyes to new possibilities in our industry and things that we can do to become more creative, maybe improve processes. And I have to just say, we were at Disneyland, which is, you guys have heard me talk about Disneyland on the show so many times because that is my home park where I grew up going to with my family. And I did start off by going to the Tiki Room, somehow convinced the group of people I was with that that's where we needed to start off at Disneyland. But we ended the event with the World of Color show one, and it was just simply breathtaking and amazing. And I found myself holding back tears, just how lovely it was. So I'm sure you're going to hear more about that from me over the coming weeks on the show because there was so much that happened at this event. But I've got to thank IAAPA and their team for putting on another amazing event. And if you are not planning to go to any of the IAAPA meetups, I have to tell you guys, sorry for the finger wagging, but this is super important. I have to tell you that is a place you need to be because not only are you able to engage with industry colleagues, we can learn from each other, we can network, we can continue to build relationships, but selfishly, I have to say, these are one-of-a-kind experiences that you're not going to get anywhere else. IAAPA really does deliver that. So enough about that. We got to talk bathrooms. We got to talk hygiene and cleanliness in our parks. Today's session is smart restrooms, happier guests, the cleanliness KPIs you're missing. And I'm very excited about this next guest today because I am a person who has dropped my phone in a Disneyland bathroom many years ago with small children. I was juggling it all. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this is quite possibly the worst possible thing that I would ever have happen to my cell phone because the sheer volume of people that must be using these restrooms in these parks. And I think today's guest is going to shed some light on how we can change guests' mindset, like mine was, about what is happening in our parks to maintain hygiene and cleanliness. But I do have a question for you. What if the simplest way to improve guest satisfaction and revenue wasn't a new ride, but a cleaner restroom? And I want to hear your thoughts on this question and what we're about to talk about in the comments. Please leave a comment for me and Sarah. We are live, so we can take those questions as we go, but otherwise we'll still monitor those chats for replays to make sure that your questions get answered today. So let's meet Sara. Sara Muntner is my guest today, and she is a customer success manager at Essity. She's going to have to explain to us what that name means. I had to ask her that earlier today, but I'll let her do that. So what Essity Professional Hygiene does. So she's a customer success manager at Essity Professional Hygiene. She's a specialist in data-driven cleaning, hygiene, and facility efficiency. She's focused on restroom operations and high traffic venues like attractions. She helps operators use real-time insights to plan smarter and clean better. And when we asked her what she can't live without, she said she loves her crochet hook. So her yarn, her crochet hook, and she finds joy in creating. And I love that because I'm also a crocheter. Here's a fun fact. So without further ado, let's welcome Sara Muntner to the stage. Sara, how are you today?
I'm well, Sondra. How are you?
I'm good. So I know you were telling me that Essity, am I getting that right? Essity,
Yeah.
the
Essity.
company that you represent. Do you mind telling our audience? Because you told me what that name means.
It does. It's the essential necessities of life. And so think of professional hygiene as falling within that scope of that. And we just like to have a nice play on words and call ourselves Essity.
I love that. That's super creative. And I did mention before you got on here, I'm also a crocheter. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I learned it. I remember my neighbor taught me when I was like 10, and it's been a big part of my life too. So I'd
Yeah.
love to see some of the things you've created.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to show you. That's my favorite pastime. Living where I do, our winters are so long that I need an indoor activity, and that fits the bill perfectly.
Keeps you busy.
Yeah.
Well, so is there anything else that you want to tell us? I know we had a bio for you and hopefully that introduction was okay. But is there anything that you want to tell the audience about you, your professional experience, or anybody that would help them understand who you are and what you do before we get started with some of the questions that I have for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my role, I actually feel pretty fortunate. I get to work with everyone from the frontline workers that are cleaning those restrooms to their managers and supervisors who are directing the work and have to answer then to the executives on the cleanliness of the facility and the budgets that are going into that as well. So really being able to look at it from all sides of restroom management has been my joy. And we also like to joke in our industry, right, that I have my best meetings in the bathroom. So I can honestly say that because of what I do, I spend a lot of time there.
That's one thing I really love about this industry is when you look at all of the pieces that go into providing guest experiences. A lot of times things like this get over. I mean, even what I do, a lot of people don't, I tell people what I do in the industry and they're like, somebody does that? And the truth is somebody does do that because at the end of the day, you have to have success in all these different areas of attractions. And so, when I heard about your company and what you were doing, especially being, like I said, I mentioned earlier on the show, and we had chatted about it earlier. I remember when my kids were very little, and I was trying to help one of them in the restroom, and I had one on my back, and I dropped my phone in the toilet. This was before they were waterproof. So I had to finish my Disney trip without a phone. But I remember thinking, like, I don't think there's a worse place in the world to drop a phone
Right.
because of the volume of people. I know it is the happiest place on earth. It's one of my favorite places to be, but I remember thinking that. And so I know what you're going to share today is going to shed some light on why maybe it doesn't have to be the thing that people think about about attractions.
Yeah.
So when we look at unlocking the power of hygiene tech, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what we're talking about with hygiene tech. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So for what I'm working with specifically, it's two pronged. The first is understanding the traffic that's going through these restrooms because it's not always equal and it's not always as you would expect it to be. So if a ride goes down, maybe that directs the traffic in a different way that you wouldn't anticipate as the person who's doing the cleaning, right? So just the sheer numbers that are going through, being able to have something in your hands that lets you know what's happening in the moment is highly valuable. Then we match that up with our dispensing solution. So we really our niche in the market is making sure that we can have those high volume dispensers ready and that we can meet the demands of um, the high traffic areas. And so we marry that up with a technology that's actually monitoring the fill levels in your soap, toilet paper, and hand towel dispensers. What that does is it gives you advanced notification when something is about to be empty, so you can completely, if not altogether, mitigate that risk that you're going to run out of product.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it's pretty powerful when you think of those data points and then being able to marry them together And then I'm sure we have all those data lovers out there too. You can come back later and consume that information and understand what happens so you can plan better moving forward.
Yeah, and somebody who was who posted, I think you had made a post about our talk today, and somebody on that thread said, "Where do we think technology is going, and how do we think this is going to be affecting us in the future, especially when it comes to hygiene and cleanliness?" And I'm of the belief that when we automate the routine, it really brings hospitality back into our businesses, our attraction businesses, because we know, first of all, that hospitality is something that we're having to really address today because of several factors, right? Some would say the pandemic left us with some of that knowledge being lost. Others would say, the way that the newer, younger generation of workforces, we need to train them in these skills and competencies for customer service and hospitality. And I know there are some, there is one program here in the U.S. that is a hospitality that's focused on attractions. But the we had Chris Hershen speak to us at the IAAPA North American Summit. I don't know. I know you mentioned some of your colleagues were there. And when he was asked, what are the skills and competencies that the next generation is going to need? One of the things he said, well, first he said sales, and I don't disagree. That's my part of the business. So I was glad to hear him say that. But I think you'll appreciate the next thing he said was understanding the data.
Yeah.
And that includes what you're talking about today. So, my question for you is, what does data-driven cleaning mean for the attraction industry?
Really, it means the ability to have an exceptional guest experience, right? There's confidence in a park, in the concessions that you have at the park when you see that the restroom is clean, right? And then there's, speaking of the reach today of social media, I can be on my feed and you can actually type in, if you're going to an amusement park, and you can type in restrooms about that park and you'll get videos. And sometimes you'll get some videos that talk about the best restrooms, right, in a theme park. But then more often than not, you're seeing the worst restrooms, right, and what to avoid. And so what that does is that dilutes the experience, right, for that park goer, because now they're worried about where they have to go and they're trying to plan their day around which restrooms to use, which will impact what's around those restrooms, because we know that we might strategically place retail places, concessions, other things to draw people in, and you want to make sure that you have that, just the basic cleaning done, so that you don't have that negative experience. The other side of it is actually for that frontline worker, the person doing the cleaning, and what that brings to them is an optimized experience, right? So they have direction on where they need to go, what they need to do, and anticipating the needs of that restroom, whether it be a cleaning or a simple refill of a dispenser. So again, by doing that, it quietly heightens the guest experience, because we don't often talk about, oh, the bathrooms were so great there, we loved it. We expect it. And
Yeah.
so when it happens as expected, you go about your day and you enjoy it. And so the magic stays with you, right? Because you just used a clean restroom and that's what you would hope for. It's when that restroom is not clean, when there's no product in the dispensers for you to use, that it really diminishes the magic of what's happening in that park.
Yeah, and you know what, I love what you said about how it also kind of sets some expectations for the team members. I was an operator in the late '90s, so there was no of a family entertainment center, and there was no technology like that at this time. So we were relying on, for me, my employees, the average employee age was 16. We could hire 14. And I don't know if we ever even got anybody over 21, because it was just one of those jobs. It was a small family entertainment center. And I remember getting frustrated with my team sometimes because I would go into the restroom and be like, how can they not see that we're out of paper? How can they not see there's no soap? You know, how can they not see that the toilets need a refresh or the floor needs to be mopped? And I found myself doing a lot of that cleaning myself and being the person who just always had eyes. It was one place I had to have eyes on all the time in my business. So I really appreciate what you're saying today because, you know, it's not on the staff. We have to have those expectations. They have to know what those KPIs are. So I love that you guys are automating this. And I'm curious, how can real-time restroom traffic data inform the facility about upgrades or layout designs? Hopefully that's making sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And this is actually something that we're starting to see a trend in all industries, as you walk through your facility planning. So being able to extract that data and look back at what had happened is really where that planning comes into play versus using the data in the moment. So if you're looking to expand a restroom, or if you want to know where the best remodel will make the biggest impact, being able to look at that and understand what's happening. If you're closing one restroom and you want to understand how that traffic is going to be rerouted to other restrooms in the park, and for things such as signage or trails, right, to get you from one place to another. This is really where you're going to do that. And so what I really like about our system is it comes with some out of the box insights that allow you to be able to extrapolate what's happening within your park, even an hour by hour view for every single restroom. So you see how it ramps up and down throughout the day, and you can pull it, if you're a seasonal business, if you want to look at month by month, weekends versus the weekdays, being able to really understand that is what helps you in the planning phase. The other part of planning phase for facility management is your staff, and to understand how you need to be staffed at certain times of the year, because it's not going to be equal throughout a season or throughout a year if it's a year-round park. So understanding how that traffic flows through is really how you're gonna do that.
Yeah, oh, it makes perfect sense. Even in our ticketing system, we have this tool that shows high traffic times. So I can imagine maybe what you're showing. For us, for gates, we can measure that in their food and beverage. And I know that that is an amazing tool for people. So I can only imagine how helpful this must be for them to be able to measure, like, what are my peak times? When do I need to have the most staff members there? And, you know, clearly you're tracking, and and actually that kind of leads me to my next question. Would you mind kind of walking us through how fill level monitoring improves the guest experience? I know you've done a little bit of that so far.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll maybe ask you a question. Can
Sure.
you think of a negative experience you had in a public restroom
Oh,
because there was no paper?
have you ever been to Venice Beach? I'm from Venice Beach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely have some in mind.
Yeah. So you can think of a few, and it's really quick. Can you think of an experience where everything was there for you and you were like, this is great?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I know I mentioned Disney. I dropped my phone in the toilet at Disney, but I was just there, and of course, their bathrooms are a lovely experience. There's always somebody in there. I often wonder if they just actually have an assigned attendant to a restroom because of how well they are taken care of.
Right. And it's likely that they do that, or they're assigning by zones. So I'm glad that you were able to think of those positive experiences, because the first thing that comes to my mind and most people's minds when they think about a restroom experience is a negative one, because that's just human nature, right? We tend to focus on the negative oftentimes. That's what sticks in our brains. And we think of that. That one of the top reasons that there's a complaint in a restroom is because a dispenser doesn't have the product that you would expect it to have in there. So by following these refill levels, you really take that away. You're not going to have that experience because you have You have the tools in front of you without having to stand. So sometimes those attendants during peak time, you might see them standing outside of a stall with an armful of toilet paper, because as soon as someone gets out, they just want to check and see it. So this eliminates the need for them to have to do that, and they can be purposeful about where they go and when they're going, because they're tracking the data that way. So that alone, I think, gives that invaluable experience, not only for the guests, but again, your frontline worker that's in there. It helps them drive their work and makes it more meaningful and impactful because they're not doing some unnecessary things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because we know, and I know one of the things that you are about is that guest satisfaction does start in the restroom. And I appreciate you mentioning those frontline team members, because when I say that I was frustrated with my team, you know, look, now that I am the mother of teenagers, I know that that's just not what they're thinking
Right.
about. They need guidance. And to be honest, everybody needs guidance in their role in order to feel that they are moving with purpose. And so this is really fascinating. When why do you think clean restrooms are so directly tied to increasing food and beverage sales?
It goes back to that sign. I think every public restroom, right, that has food nearby has that sign that employees must wash hands before returning to work. That's always what comes to my mind. And so when I'm in there and I know that there's no soap or that there's no hand towels, it, it makes me think. It makes me think that those hygiene practices aren't really being upheld, which is going to then transfer to think of all those touch points, that happen when someone is handling your food. So it makes me personally less likely to go to those places. And I will say there's been an amusement park I've gone to that I knew the bathrooms weren't as great, and I packed my own lunch. And I just had my sandwich right in my bag for me because I didn't want to have to guess about the hygiene practices of the park as a whole. So the way you take care of your guests and your restrooms really does carry over to how you think that the hygiene in the park as a whole is happening.
Well, and I would say even in restaurants. So my husband took
Oh,
me to a really expensive restaurant up in Boulder, and I'm not going to call them out right now, for Valentine's Day. And and it's interesting because while I understand why we need gender neutral bathrooms, I am finding those tend to be the ones I like to use the least as a woman, because if I'm in high heels, I don't want to be stepping in that mess,
yep.
right? Like I dressed up, we're spending a small fortune on this meal, and you have an expectation of the bathrooms being a certain way, and I hate that that's what I remember about the experience,
Yeah, it
right?
does. It diminishes it. It diminishes the experience for you, and it takes away that carefree want, right? To pick your souvenirs, to remember what you did, or to try all the different foods that you've heard so much about along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, so it makes sense that that would affect, someone's experience, especially when it comes to food, because it certainly may it not I I didn't correlate the food and beverage or the food and beverage piece necessarily with those unclean bathrooms. For me, I feel like if you're going to have a gender neutral bathroom, you got to make sure it's clean,
Yep.
right? Because I'm a mom of boys. They have their own bathroom for a reason, right? Like, and so, when you go into these situations, like I said, we spent a small fortune on dinner, and then the experience is diminished because of an unclean restroom. I, I've never, until this conversation and anticipation of this conversation, really thought about it that way. But you're right. So many parks also have food and retail located around the restrooms. And I think that's because a lot of guests use their restroom breaks as a little bit of a reprieve too,
Mhm.
to
Yep.
relax, to get ready. They're going to wash their hands before they go get the food. I mean,
Mhm.
for me, that's
Yep.
why when I'm planning my day at an attraction, oftentimes the bathroom stop is planned right before the food, because I want my kids to wash their hands
Yep.
before we eat. So it's like you said, but you know, uh, I think we've answered some of this, but I am curious if you have any other examples, or have any other bad restroom experiences that overall, I guess we've kind of talked about this, but the overall magic of the park is diminished when the restrooms aren't clean. So, what are some of the common restroom pain points that attractions might overlook?
So beyond the food side of things, and what we're doing, it goes back to those touch points again. So if I'm standing in line and I want to lean up against a rail, or I'm touching something, my mind is always thinking about who just touched this besides me. Are they washing their hands? Do I have everything? Do I feel confident, right, that these things are happening? Um, uh, Social media, again, I think is really influencing our park experiences now, because you're using that as your guide, right, to on where to go and where not to go. And so if I'm going to hear from somebody that the restrooms in a certain area are really bad, it's very likely I'm not going to go anywhere near that for anything, not just the restroom, but I'm going to stay away from that area completely. So instead of having that magical experience where you get to experience the joy of what's happening throughout the park, you're preoccupied with what you need to avoid because of what you've heard from others. So being able to take that away and bring that magic back, I think is really the key here when we're talking about the theme parks, because no matter what theme park you're at, they're trying to carry you away, right, into a great experience and fully immerse you. So being able to have those clean restrooms and the confidence that they're being cleaned and that your hygiene needs are going to be met, just allows you to be able to step into the magic.
Yeah, and when you mention like their needs being met, it makes me naturally think of my experience with small children and even babies in the restroom. And I used to have to tell my kids, don't touch anything. We had a pocket rule when we were in the bathroom,
Yes.
public restrooms, like hands are in the pocket unless it's necessary. So I certainly understand the challenge of keeping those restrooms clean for all different types of families and patrons that are coming to these facilities that want to know that those needs are being met. And I'm curious, when we start looking at efficiency, sustainability, and the bottom line for attractions, how can the data help frontline workers and custodial teams at attractions work smarter and not harder?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see two things with our data. There's really two habits that are very clear when somebody starts using torque vision cleaning. That's our solution that we have in the restrooms to manage. Because we do something called a quiet time. So we'll install everything and we'll give it a couple weeks just so we understand, right, the KPIs and what we're really trying to target here. So in that time, you're either going to see that the dispensers are often empty. So when someone goes, there's not going to be anything in there for them, or they are always full. They're always at this status that says they're full and everything is great. So that second one I just described is telling you that they're doing some premature filling of these dispensers, which is not sustainable, from the earth that we love, right? Or from a cost standpoint. And so really from an operations side of things, this is a large part of the budget, when we talk about the restroom management and the products that go through there. So being able to take that data and understand, one, where your pain points are so that you can optimize those refills and change them at the right time. But it also helps you to plan for your upcoming season. So I've worked with water parks, and which is seasonal, in this area that I'm working in. They were able to use their consumption data from last season to predict what they're going to be ordering, and then so when they're planning their budgets, that data is real, it's concrete, and it allows them, to plan better and to also track their budgets right throughout and how they're performing. So from that standpoint, I think the data is invaluable, and it also heightens, right, your knowledge into the difference between the restrooms. So you had talked about the male versus female, and even those single user or family restrooms. You'll start to see differences between them. You might see higher traffic in a men's restroom, but you're going to see lower consumption of things like toilet paper and hand soap and even hand towels versus a women's restroom that might have a lot less traffic, but we see that the use of those products is higher. So being able to understand that and plan your staff so you don't have to have somebody there a 1-to-1 ratio, what you mentioned before, so one attendant to one restroom. You can free up that time for that attendant to be able to do that. One of the things I like to talk about is the time that they can save by using this system. So I'm going to use this number just because it's a formula that I've worked with before. So if a park has 120 dispensers and 5 times a day there's an attendant going to every single one of those dispensers to open them and check them, that adds up to over 3 hours of time.
Wow.
When you move to a data-driven cleaning system like Torque Vision cleaning, what that does is that it frees up 3 hours of time. So you can expect a 91% reduction in the time checking dispensers because there's no need to go in and open them one by one and check them. So think about what could be done in this park that has 120 dispensers. I know parks probably have a lot more than that, but that 3 hours a day, where could that 3 hours be reallocated? Is there somewhere else in the park that those services can be used? Because oftentimes that restroom attendant is more than just the restroom. It's outside the restroom. It's other areas within the park that they're responsible for. So being able to understand the time that's going in here and the time that they're saving is really key.
Well, and I love that you brought up the time savings because right there is an ROI.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That alone is a strong ROI, but I'm also curious because you did mention that. In what ways does restroom hygiene contribute to operational ROI beyond that? Is there anything else?
Really, it's about managing the products. So your costs for the products going in, and then marrying that up with the labor. Those are the two biggest ways that you're going to see your operations impacts, both in labor and your spend. I will say one of the challenges that we're seeing in the cleaning industry as a whole is a shortage of workers and a very high turnover rate. So I was reading an article a couple weeks ago that suggested in the US, in the cleaning industry, your turnover rate is 200%.
Wow.
So if you have 150 employees as your cleaners, you can expect in 1 year to have 300 hires if you can find the people, right, to be able to do
Wow.
that. Think of the expense that goes along not only with the hiring process and constantly, right, having to interview and train. It's that onboarding time that we can reduce by having all of your cleaning plans digitized. All of the expectations are laid out there. So if somebody gets an alert that this restroom has had 100 visitors and it really needs to be cleaned, they're going to go into that restroom and they're going to be able to see, while I'm here, this is what I'm expected to do, whether it be wipe the water from the mirrors, make sure the garbage is taken out, and so on. That list is there for them. And so taking away that ambiguity and sometimes that onboarding time of someone having to walk you through it, you're going to have it in your hands for you. So that alone, I think, is really helping to make the hiring process and the turnover situation more efficient than what it used to be.
Yeah, so you guys are going up beyond just the bathroom affecting change for the employees, which is super important because I read something that said the reason most employees quit, you know what that is? It's wild.
Tell me, unhappy with their
No,
employers? I don't
no,
know.
it's actually that they don't have clarity on what they should be doing. So they're not confident in the work
Yeah.
that they're doing. And when I read that, it was very interesting to me because like I mentioned, when I ran my park, the average age of my employees was 16. which, can be fun because these are people's kids who you're training oftentimes to do this work. And, I certainly understand how they could feel stressed about not understanding what's expected of them and how to be successful in their role. So you all are going beyond just what's happening in the restrooms from a cleanliness standpoint, but also really empowering the teams. And that's pretty cool to see. I really can appreciate how technology is being used to do that because I think
Yeah.
it's super important. And like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, and I think it was on your post, there was this great question about how technology is affecting this. And, I do believe that technology is a part of the experience for some, for it can be a part of the experience for our guests, but it's also a part of the experience for our teams.
Mhm. It absolutely is. And when you bring in technology, it's an investment. It's an investment for your business as a whole, and that includes an investment for your employees. So my satisfaction is going to go up, I think, as an employee when I see that I am cared about and the work I do is valued, and we're going to invest so that we can help you do your job. Sometimes you're doing the same job or you're expected to do more with less
Right.
people, less help, right? So having those tools and being able to do that, I think is priceless. And really today, technology is in everything. It's in everything we do. I have a camera that sits outside my house, right? That tracks things. I have an app for my garage door, for my thermostat. I even have one for my bird feeder in the backyard. So think about that in your personal life and how you're using technology. And it's just part of your day, and being able to take that into your work life and apply those same principles, because it's the same thing. You're pulling up your mobile device and you're swiping and working through the same thing. So it's just a natural flow, I think, of what we're seeing in the world as a whole today.
I think so too. And I think you kind of nailed it when you said you're buying your technology is going to buy our time back
Yes.
in many ways. And that is important because when we buy our time back with the tech, we are able to better serve as human beings, in my opinion. I don't know if everybody listening feels that way because I know for a long time, I mean, I've been advocating for these things for a long time, but I have an old show that I did a couple of years back, and it was about how the tech that you're using also tells your team members how you feel about them. Are you trying to make this a better work environment for them? Are you empowering them with tools to make sure that they're doing the job that they've been assigned to do to the best of their ability because they have clarity? I love, do you know Brene Brown? Have you ever
No.
read any of her stuff? She's got this great book. It's called Dare to Lead. And she's interesting because she had gone into even the military and brought kind of a heart back into leadership. And her stuff is really great. But one of the things she says is the best thing that we can do for our team, the kindest thing we can do is to be clear about what's needed in their role. And this is such a cool tool, I believe, towards achieving that goal and giving your team clarity.
It is. It's full transparency, really. And the beauty, the frontline worker is seeing the same thing that the supervisor or manager is seeing at any time, right? And so there's no ambiguity. It's fully clear what the expectation is. And again, having something in the palm of your hands versus having to go manually do it, that's where it is. It's giving you your time back.
It's giving your time back, but also when we're better at what we do, it it allows the guests or it allows the team to have more meaningful exchanges with the guests. And so instead of being told like, "Hey, you're out of toilet paper," I can't tell you how many times I have found an attendant and said that one's out of toilet paper, or you know what I mean, or
Yeah.
the airport is. I hope you guys get into airports. I live in the
We
airport.
are. We
So
are.
okay, good. I was going to say
We
I
are
live in the
absolutely there.
airport. And the Denver airport, I cannot count how many times I've had to reach over somebody to get
Yeah.
soap because the one in front of me is empty, right? And so, I think a lot of what we're doing in attractions translate to other industries for sure.
Right. Well, it's the high traffic aspect of it that we see in many industries, and how do we best meet those needs? Number one, first and foremost, you have to have a system, a high capacity dispensing system, right? That can meet those needs. But then when you marry that with the technology, really you're creating a different type of environment for people. And same thing with the theme park at an airport. You can just take care of your needs and then be on your way and not even have to think about it or worry about it. The reach over, I've had experiences like that too. Or when the dispenser isn't placed in the right place, right? Not walking around with your wet hands trying to figure out where you need to go. So being with a company that can show you best placement, best systems, and the best way to manage it, I think really brings a whole new dynamic.
Yeah, Sarah, what a cool thing that you guys do. What a
Thank
cool
you.
thing that you do. And, I love having, I always say, this show I created to have people who are supporting attractions be the best they can be at what they do. And I would certainly say you all are one of those companies that are helping them accomplish that. So I really appreciate you being here today and sharing these ideas, especially as we get closer to many of our parks opening for this next season. This might not be something they can roll out tomorrow, but it's certainly something they can look forward to and try to work towards. I think you've given us a lot of information today that is going to help attractions just be better at what they do. That's really my mission here. And it sounds like it's something that we can both be aligned on. So I really appreciate you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I do have one last question for you. If somebody watching the show or listening on our podcast, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you or your company if they would like to engage with you in getting help in their restrooms?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to our website, torqueusa.com. And from there, there's a contact us, and you can be directed. You would want to ask for Torque Vision Cleaning specifically if you wanted to connect with somebody on my team to talk about the technology piece. But really, we have a pretty comprehensive network for you, so we'll be sure to have someone no matter where you are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you again for being here and sharing these ideas and actually some of the things that you shared, like the statistics of turnover or cleaning staff. I mean, that's really that's a lot. When you think about 200%, like you're saying, turnover rate and how you guys can help make that better for these attractions. So I really, again, appreciate you being here, appreciate what you've shared. And I'm looking forward to maybe even having you back on this show because I think this is a topic that does not just, you can't cover it all in one.
Yeah, we could talk for days
I
on restrooms. Absolutely.
I agree. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Sondra.
Hey, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I do truly believe that how our guests see our restrooms impacts the overall experience and satisfaction of our guests. I mean, I don't know how anyone who actually visits attractions could not feel that way to some degree. But, when I started this show today, I asked you a question, what's the simplest way to increase guest satisfaction that's not tied to a new ride or some huge investment that you might be making in changing your attractions, but rather the restroom. And Sarah really blew my mind today with some of the statistics that she shared, but also some of the tools that they're using to make sure that you do have those cleanliness KPIs and metrics and that we are creating purpose in what those frontline workers in our parks who are tasked with making sure that they are clean and that everything is up to standards have in terms of transparency and understanding what they need to do, and even the sustainability piece, which is a huge part of the conversations that we're having in attractions right now. So, if you are someone like Sarah who has an amazing product or service, or are just helping attractions do what they do better, because there's always going to be improvement. Look, there was another quote shared, that there was another thing that Chris uh, shared with us at the IAAPA North America Summit when he was on stage. He said that we need to, I actually, bear with me, I wrote this quote down because it really resonated with me about where we're going as professionals, but also where we're going as an industry. And he said, and I cannot steal this, but Chris Hershen said, make sure I wrote this down. If you were there, I want to hear the quote. The one where he said, you might be ripe and rotting, right? Too ripe and rotting because we're not moving towards change. I guess I did not. Oh, you're either green and growing, and I like green and growing because green for money, or you're ripe and rotting. And so it's going to take conversations like this, you as attractions having conversations with people like Sara, to make sure that you are green and growing, that you're generating revenue, that you're buying your time back through these kind of tools that we have in technology, instead of being ripe and rotting, doing the same things. There was another person who was on stage that said, that if we're not looking to grow, then we're pretty much dying, and you don't want that in your park. You don't want that as a professional. You've got to continue to find these ways to improve the business. And this is just such a great tool to do that. So I really want to thank Sara for being here today. I'm looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I want to mention, but we're going to be talking about this a lot because this event really blew my mind. There was so much happening, but this is your show for today. I'm your host, Sondra Shannon, and I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you spending the time with me and with Sara to hear about these innovations that are happening in the industry. If you haven't heard, next week is the Gatemaster GT Summit. I've taken some of my favorite guests from last year, and I'm bringing them to you to share these ideas in a much different capacity, more in a training capacity. We really focused on the training that parks would need to open for this next season. So if you have not grabbed your ticket to the GT Summit, I want to encourage you to do that. If you can't be here with us, oh, there we go. We got a barcode up here that you can scan QR code. If you cannot join us in person, and we have limited capacity in person, so we're tapping out on there anyways, there is a virtual option. And with that virtual option, even if you can't sit with us through the entire recordings, you will have option to the recordings, or sit through us with that through the entire event. You will have the recordings that you can use in the future, watch in the future, and get better at what you do. And it is this is brought to you by my guests. I've had so many people come to me and say, I really love this show. I want to learn from that person some more. And this is an opportunity to do that. So I hope that you'll grab that VIP ticket to be in person. There's a few of those left. Get to have a wine tasting night with me and all of the amazing guests. There's also the virtual option, so you'll have those recordings and an opportunity to learn and improve what you're doing and learn from people who are helping attractions do better. So I really want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you on the next Live with Sondra show. Take care, everybody.